She asked me, is it in an area where trucks frequent? I said, yes.
A mobile serial killer, able to strike anywhere, anytime.
It was a unique-looking truck that appeared to be yellow in color,
leaving police no way of knowing where this monstrous predator will strike next.
There was no doubt in my mind or any other detective's minds that he was going to continue killing until he got caught.
There are 47,000 miles of interstate freeways running throughout the U.S. with an estimated 2 million trucks traveling on them 24/7. Those who drive the big rigs are phantoms of the night. Alone, anonymous, and constantly on the move. Several major interstate highways thread across Tennessee, making Nashville's main truck stop one of the busiest in the country. Because it borders the city's high-crime downtown area, it's constantly monitored by surveillance cameras and patrolled by security guards. On June 26, 2007, one of those guards is making his rounds amongst the trucks when he comes across a gruesome sight.
She was found at the back of the truck stop, displayed in a way that appeared she had not just been thrown out.
The victim was lying on her back. Her legs were spread, her feet were pressed together at the soles, arms were positioned upward.
The likely cause of death is immediately obvious: a bullet to the head. Veteran Detective Sergeant Pat Postilione is the first homicide investigator to arrive at the crime scene.
Where the victim was found, there was a small amount of blood, which would indicate to us that the victim was probably not killed at that location.
Postilione instantly senses that the person who murdered this young woman is no amateur.
It's based on our experience. We felt that they may be dealing with a serial killer, mainly because of the way the victim was positioned.
Postilione believes that positioning could be the signature of a demented individual. Near the body, police find a shoe print with a distinctive ring pattern on the sole, common in certain types of work boots. The constant traffic of trucks and drivers makes this an especially difficult crime scene to search for evidence.
So when you're trying to process it in terms of finding a homicide victim, it is difficult to process because of the transient type traffic that comes and goes on a constant basis.
Luckily, they've got a very specific time frame to work with. According to the security guard, the body wasn't there when he made his rounds half an hour earlier. That means the victim's body was dumped between 12:20 and 12:50 a.m. While reviewing the surveillance camera video for the time in question, something catches Detective Postiglione's eye.
We noticed one particular truck went all the way to the back side of the truck stop. That was the very same area where the victim was found. It was a unique-looking truck that appeared to be yellow in color. We couldn't see any identifiers on it. It was pulling a regular box-type trailer.
There are no credit card receipts that would indicate that the driver stopped for gas or food. In fact, after just 16 minutes, the truck drove off of the lot and headed back in the direction it came from. While the police scour the truck for clues, the medical examiner confirms that the young woman died from a single .22 caliber gunshot to the head at close range. He also finds bruises, cuts, and abrasions, suggesting a violent struggle and even evidence of excruciating torture.
She had a significant wound to her buttocks area that appeared to have been cut out with a knife.
Semen found in her body is sent to the lab for DNA analysis. The victim's fingerprints match ones that are already in the state's database. She's 25-year-old Sarah Hulbert of Nashville.
Hello?
Police immediately reach out to Sarah's family to share the terrible news.
We went to the coroner's office because we were still in disbelief, thinking, oh, maybe it's not her, maybe it's someone else. Unfortunately, we were wrong. You know, you never expect anything like that to happen.
So what can you tell me about Sarah?
The detective tries to learn all he can about this young victim to help him understand how she came to be found dead in a Nashville truck stop.
She was born in Memorial Hospital here in Nashville. She was the baby of us 4. She lived with us for the first 3 years of her life.
But tragedy struck the family, leaving Sarah with deep emotional scars.
Our mother passed away when we were young. We have family in Washington State, in Elma, Washington, and Sarah went there. She was raised by our aunt and uncle for the first big portion of her life.
Hey guys, how are you?
At the age of 18, Sarah moved back to Nashville to be closer to her sisters. She soon met a guy, fell in love, and had 2 girls whom she adored.
She was passionate, of course, about her girls. Her girls were very important to her. She loved playing with them, taking pictures of them, and things to that nature.
But the relationship didn't last, and Sarah was left to raise the girls on her own. The pressures mounted quickly, and soon her joyful life as a young mother slipped away as she was seduced by a destructive lifestyle. She started hanging around with the wrong crowd and eventually became addicted to crack cocaine.
Whenever she wasn't on drugs, she was very happy, very easy to get along with. But when she was on the drugs, she was very argumentative, wanted to fight.
As drugs began to rule her life, Sarah's 2 girls were taken away by the Department of Children's Services and separated. One was adopted by an aunt. The other one went to live with a family friend. Everyone in the family had been praying that this kind-hearted young woman would somehow kick her addiction.
We wanted her to get it together for the girls, because we knew how hard it was growing up without your mother.
Family tried to help Sarah. They've had her in and out of rehab several times. She tried to do right, but the pull of the drugs apparently was just too strong.
Without her kids, Sarah spiraled further out of control. She became a prostitute to support her drug habit. But a few months before her death, she made a huge decision to get clean.
She had actually reached a point in her life and gone through rehab and was in recovery for a while. And then a short time before she was murdered, within a couple of months, had relapsed and had started using crack cocaine again.
To get money to buy drugs, Sarah turned quick tricks at the truck stop.
Many truck stops will attract women. A lot of them are prostitutes, and they're trying to ply their trade with lonely truck drivers. The women will sneak onto the lots because there's a lot of security around these truck stops, and literally go knocking door to door to see if anybody is interested in their services.
Within the trucker community, these prostitutes were known as lot lizards.
I think the lot lizard got its name because they're always slithering and sneaking around.
Truckers who want to be left alone put signs on their windows to show they're not interested. The hole in the fence near where Sarah Hulbert's body was found was used by prostitutes and drug dealers to sneak onto the truck stop's huge lot. So it seems likely that Sarah was working as a lot lizard the night of her death. Police finally get their first lead in the case from Sarah's sisters, who mentioned two men Sarah often hung out with.
They too were involved in drugs, and they were in that same lifestyle.
Could these two lowlifes hold the key to unlocking Sarah's grisly murder? Or is there a much more sinister evil at work? Police are puzzled by the murder of a young woman who was found at a truck stop in Nashville, Tennessee. 25-year-old Sarah Hulbert was shot in the head and mutilated. Her nude body left posed in an unusual position. Family members direct police toward two drug dealers she was known to hang out with.
We were looking for two guys who were with Sarah the night we believe she was killed. They were hanging with her in the area of 𝐀𝐥𝐢𝐸, which is actually close to the truck stop. And we wanted to find these two guys to determine whether they were involved in her death or whether they were present when she was killed.
Lead detective Pat Postiglione tracks them down and questions them.
Okay, you guys tell us what's going on.
They were reluctant to speak to us initially, but not because they're involved in a homicide, just because they're involved in everyday other criminal activity.
But they quickly realize they're in the hot seat. So Lee and Hollywood, as they call themselves, admit they were Sarah's drug connection and also her pimps. But they insist they didn't kill her. On the night Sarah was murdered, the three of them had been driving around together, drinking beer and smoking crack, when they started arguing with her.
The argument was about her going out doing tricks so she could get money in order to buy drugs for them.
They claim that was the last time they saw her.
Well, when she didn't come back, 1 hour turned into 2, turned into 3. They decided she must have left the truck stop with the trucker, and they left.
But Postiglione isn't going to take their word for it. He asks them to submit samples of their DNA.
They agreed because they wanted to be taken off the suspect list, and they was clearly at the top of the suspect list. Why? Because they were the last ones that we knew of at the time to be with the victim.
But the semen taken from Sarah's body doesn't match the DNA of either of the men. And Postiglione must rule them out as top suspects, though he still senses they haven't told him the whole story. And as it turns out, the DNA from the semen sample doesn't match any of the thousands of sex offenders in the FBI's national database. It seems the man who attacked and killed Sarah is entirely off the grid of law enforcement. But Postiglione continues to have a nagging feeling that this is not the criminal's first kill. He contacts the FBI again, this time to find out if they have any cases with similar characteristics that match the killer's MO.
The FBI has a database called VICAP, where they track violent crime that occurs nationwide, and agencies all across the country would submit their particular crime and hopefully get a match of a similar type crime committed in another jurisdiction. Maybe we're dealing with the same perpetrator.
The FBI team plugs the details of Sarah's murder into the system. Before the day is out, they call back with big news.
We found out about another killing that happened in Lebanon, Tennessee.
The victim had been found 3 weeks earlier. Her nude body stuffed in a dumpster at a truck stop in Lebanon, Tennessee. She was identified as 48-year-old prostitute Samantha Winters.
We suspect that Samantha was picked up at the very same truck stop where Sarah was killed. We believe she was killed between Nashville and Lebanon, Tennessee.
Police quickly learned Samantha also worked as a lot lizard. at the truck stop in Nashville where Sarah's body was discovered. Like Sarah, she had been shot once in the head with a .22 caliber gun and carefully posed. There are no leads and no witnesses.
They were both addicted to drugs. They would both prostitute themselves to truckers. So that was an obvious connection, in addition to the similarities in their deaths.
But that's not the only match the VICAP system turns up. 2 other homicide cases in nearby states have all the same hallmarks of this sadistic killer. Both occurred before Sarah's murder. The first victim is 43-year-old Sherry Drinkard, who was found beside the highway near Lake Station, Indiana. Her naked body was in plain view of a busy truck stop. Like Sarah and Samantha, her body was posed and showed signs of torture. She had also been shot in the head with a .22 caliber rifle. The other homicide victim was found in Sewanee, Georgia.
I heard the call go out at about 4:15 that there was a person down at a local motel near the interstate. When I arrived at the scene, I witnessed what appeared to be a female was lying on her back. She was lying in a position as if she had been posed. Whoever placed this body wanted her private female parts to be seen.
Like the other 3 women, she'd been shot in the head with a .22 rifle.
The victim was fingerprinted, and we received a match.
Catherine Glover happened to be watching TV when the murder story was aired.
I seen the news report and on that Monday, and I was like, that's sad. Somebody's mother or daughter or child is dead.
Little did she know that this beloved member of someone's family was her own mom, Deborah Ann Glover, a mother of 5 from Atlanta.
The medical examiner called me the next day. At the same time, I was watching the news, and they showed her picture, and it just messed me up.
Deborah Ann's eldest daughter, Tamika, talked with her mother just hours before her death. She made her daughter promise to share a message with her siblings.
And she said, I want you to tell your siblings this, that I've always loved you guys, that I never stopped loving you guys, and that I will forever love you guys. And that is what I want you to tell them. And I said, okay, Mom, I love you too. We love you too. I love you, Mom. And then she said, don't call this number back. I'll call you back later. And that was the last time anybody talked to her again. When I didn't hear back from her after I spoke to her, I got a feeling about 1 o'clock on Sunday, which is around the time the detectives think she went missing.
Like Sarah and Samantha, Deborah Ann was a street prostitute with a serious drug addiction she was struggling to overcome.
I don't think she really wanted to be on drugs. A lot of people think somebody's on drugs or somebody's doing something like prostituting, that they're just a bad person, but it just wasn't the case.
Mommy, wake up. Mommy.
In November of 2006, Tamika tried to help her mother clean up for the holidays. Around Christmas, shortly before her death, Deborah Ann started turning her life around. But then, she suddenly disappeared. How many more victims has this violent predator already taken that police don't know about? And how long before this monster strikes again? As Detective Postilion and his Nashville investigators in Georgia are stunned to learn from their counterparts in Tennessee and Indiana that Deborah Ann Glover's murder is being seen as part of this serial killer's rampage.
They thought that it might be a truck stop killer. I advised her that I didn't know that mine would be linked to that because my victim was not located at a truck stop. And she asked me, is your area where the body was found, is it in an area where trucks frequent? I said, yes. Your victim was a prostitute, correct? Yes. My victim's position. Later, I was able to view the crime scene photos from the Nashville PD case. It was eerily similar in the way their victim was posed and the way my victim was found. And it gave me cold chills at the similarities of the two crime scenes.
We felt like we were getting involved in something that was going to involve many victims, possibly all across the country. We began getting inquiries from other agencies, and we felt like this possibly was the tip of the iceberg of many killings.
4 women dead in a period of 5 months, anywhere, without leaving a trace. 𝐀𝐥𝐢𝐞𝐬 has no idea where the killer will strike next, so he decides to revisit where he's already been, Nashville's main truck stop, and have another search for clues.
And we wanted to double check the fuel receipts and make sure we didn't miss any fuel receipts that might explain why that particular truck was in there on June the 25th.
But as the detective is approaching the truck stop, he can't quite believe what he sees.
As I turned right on North 1st Street, I saw this vehicle coming toward me. And the vehicle looked to me very similar to the vehicle that we had observed on the video, going into the truck stop, staying just 16 minutes and then leaving.
It's a yellow tractor pulling a white trailer.
I couldn't tell if it was coming out of the truck stop or past it. He obviously didn't realize that I was a police officer in the police car, and I called my detective and told him I was going to follow this truck just to see where he went, and I gave him all the information off the truck just in case something happened. When he turned into the truck stop, I followed him in. And I told the detective that I was going to approach the truck and try to speak with the driver.
The detective has no way of knowing if he's about to come face to face with an innocent man or a sadistic serial killer.
I banged on the door. I got no response. I banged on the door a second time, and I saw the curtain move, and I saw a male white looking down at me.
Please, can I have a word?
The driver opens the door and comes out of the truck.
He had acted like I had just woken him up. That's when I asked him if he had any identification, and if so, could I see it? He showed me his driver's license.
The driver is 56-year-old Bruce Mendenhall of Albion, Illinois. 𝐀𝐥𝐢𝐞𝐬 tries to engage him in conversation.
Just doing some follow-up on some cabs around the area, looking for yellow trucks.
I asked him about his yellow truck. I asked him how long he had worked for the company. He told me that the last time that truck had been in Nashville was May of 2007.
Suddenly, he spots something alarming on the inside of the truck door.
I did notice on the driver's door, to me, it looked like several blood drops. I also noticed on his left thumb something that to me appeared to be blood.
Keeping his attitude low-key, 𝐀𝐥𝐢𝐞𝐬 tells Mendenhall that police are asking drivers of yellow tractors with white trailers to volunteer DNA samples.
He agreed to give us a DNA test. He actually signed a DNA consent form, and he gave a mouth swab. As I was speaking to him, after he gave us his DNA sample, a little inner voice said to me, don't let him leave without looking inside the truck. And because of that, I asked him, I said, do you mind if I look inside the truck? And he gave me verbal consent to go up inside of his truck and look.
As he surveys the sleeping compartment behind the front seat, his eyes fall on a pair of work boots.
I looked at the shoes, and the shoe print on the bottom of the shoe was very similar in nature to the shoe print we had seen next to where our victim was found.
Then he spots a black garbage bag behind the driver's seat. Hall has a ready explanation for the blood. He says he cut his leg getting inside the truck a couple of hours ago.
I asked him to show me the cut, and he pulled his pant leg up and he showed me his leg, but there was no cut.
Both men know Mendenhall is lying, and neither knows what might happen next. Then the truck driver comes up with another story.
I had a girl here last night. She cut herself.
So then he said, well, actually what happened was I had a prostitute last night, and she was in the truck and she cut her hand. And because she was bleeding, we used these napkins to clean up the blood that was from her hand, and it was a large amount of blood, a lot more than a cut hand would have accumulated.
Postilion is certain he's found the truck stop killer. The question is, where is his murder weapon? And now that he's cornered, will the detective be his next victim? On a hunch, homicide detective Pat Postilion returns to a Nashville truck stop to search for evidence that will lead to the identity of Sarah Hulbert's killer. To his astonishment, a truck looking exactly like the one identified on a surveillance tape the night of the murder passes him and pulls in at the truck stop. When the driver is caught in a lie, Postilion realizes he's face to face with a demented killer. His immediate thought is to secure any firearms that Mendenhall might have on hand.
Do you have any weapons in the vehicle? Yeah, I have a gun.
I asked him what type of weapon it was, and he admitted that he had a .22 rifle in the truck, which gave us more than enough probable cause to arrest him for homicide.
Mendenhall calmly hands over the gun, and the detective knows the immediate threat to his own safety is over. So he decides to ask his suspect some blunt questions.
And then I had asked him if this was a truck that we've been looking for all this time. Was I sitting in that truck? And he wouldn't answer me. And I had to ask him 2 or 3 times whether I was sitting inside the truck. And then he shrugged his shoulders and said, if you say it is. And then I followed that up by asking him if he was the person we've been looking for.
You the guy we're looking for?
And he did the same thing. He just looked at me, and then he eventually shrugged his shoulders and said, if you say so. He never said no. He never said, I don't know what you're talking about. He never denied anything. He just said, if you say so.
You're under arrest. Step out of the cab.
Postilion escorts Mendenhall out of the truck, where his partner is waiting to handcuff him and read him his rights. The detectives can barely believe this stunning turn of events. But could this lucky break be too good to be true? Mendenhall's truck is taken to the Metropolitan Justice Center Crime Lab, where CSI technicians begin processing it for evidence, while Postilion gets ready to grill the truck driver.
We're in the process of interviewing Bruce D. Mendenhall, Mendenhall.
Mendenhall immediately drops a bombshell.
They rode with me.
He admits to dumping bodies at truck stops, but insists he wasn't the one who killed any of the women.
Well, he said Richie and David were the real killers, and they would show up at every truck stop he happened to be at. And when they would leave, there would be a body left in his truck. Later, he would add the name Terry, so we actually had 3 people.
I went into the TA, got me something to eat, come back out, and this lady was sprawled out in the back. I said, you guys, what the hell? They go, it's your problem, not ours.
And he would be left to clean the mess up. Whether it was removing the body, whether it was cleaning up the blood, there was always something.
Mendenhall said the men always used his rifle to shoot the women and would leave their dead bodies in his truck.
head was on the, pointed towards the driver's side, and her legs were down below.
When Bruce Mendenhall was talking to detectives about how he came into contact with Sarah Holbert's body, he told the story of going into the truck stop, and when he came out, Sarah was in his truck and she was already dead.
With 3 guys in his truck and a woman's dead body on his mattress, he told investigators that he panicked and removed Sarah's body, placing it at the far corner of the truck stop.
I dumped her body there in behind the trailers, right out in plain view.
But the cops aren't buying this implausible story for a minute.
He was accurately describing the crime scenes. The only exception was he was taking himself out as the killer, and he was replacing himself with Richie, David, and Terry.
Mr. Mendenhall's story was that these 3 young men had followed him down from Indiana.
So they showing up at these truck stops, and when they show up, people die. What we're trying to determine is whether you're trying to put the blame somewhere, Bruce, when really, maybe it's you. You're the one in the middle of all this.
I am in the middle of it.
Well, there's no question about that.
His story was that they were trying to frame him for murder, when in fact he was obviously trying to frame somebody else for murder.
So we did look into the persons that he identified. They did exist. We located all 3 of them. We interviewed them. We got alibis. We got their DNA. We got their fingerprints, so there was no issue in terms of them even remotely being involved in this.
He'd had run-ins with about every one of them over something small. He specifically named these 3 individuals as the people that are committing the murder, I guess, in his way to kind of get back at them.
Mendenhall reveals that the most recent killing was the night before in Indiana.
So what do they do with the body?
I don't know.
The blood that's in your truck right now in that bag, where did that come from?
Her.
In his mind, he was smarter than the police. His explanation in his mind made perfect sense, and he believed he could sell that story. And it doesn't play anywhere, but in his mind it did.
I think maybe Mendenhall thought that he was above capture. I thought maybe he thought he could fool the police.
The investigators now look deeper into Bruce Mendenhall's background and are stunned to learn that their killer is just an ordinary family man with no record of violence.
He was married. He had 2 children who I believe were either late teens or early 20s, so grown children by this point in time. And we knew that at some point in the past he had had a very unsuccessful run for the mayor of his town in Albion, Illinois.
I worked at as a bartender in a small town in Mount Carmel, not too far from Albion. And every Friday night, the Mendenhall and some friends would come in. They'd sit at the same table. They'd order the same beer. And I'd try to wait on them. They didn't want to be waited on. They'd come up to the bar and get their own beer and take their beer back, and they'd bring their empties up. It was the same thing every Friday night. And that's how I first met Bruce Mendenhall.
But the forensic evidence discovered in Mendenhall's truck reveals that behind this ordinary man lurks a predatory monster.
Well, the rear compartment of his truck, he had knives back there, he had handcuffs back there, he had a billy club. He had all the tools of the trade, plus he had numerous sex toys and porno films and things of that nature. We characterized the back compartment of his truck as a killing chamber in a trial because that's where he would lure his victims and then he would murder them various ways.
From the mattress, floor, walls, and even the ceiling, they discovered blood-spattered DNA from 7 different women. Investigators determined that the bloody clothing in the bag belonged to an Indiana prostitute whose friends and family hadn't yet realized she was missing. In all, more than 300 pieces of horrifying evidence are cataloged. Will it be enough to put Mendenhall behind bars for good? Or does he have another devious trick up his sleeve? As Detective Pat Postilione interrogates Bruce Mendenhall for the murder of Sarah Hulbert, his prime suspect denies killing her and 6 other women whose DNA was found in his truck. Mendenhall spins a bizarre and unbelievable tale about how he was forced by 3 men to dispose of the bodies of several women who were killed in his truck.
And you said that they killed about 7 women in your presence or close to a time when you were there. Does that sound right?
Something like that.
But a thorough search of Mendenhall's truck tells a very different story. There were no traces of the other 3 men in the back of the truck, and the only fingerprints on the murder weapon were Mendenhall's.
We recovered from his truck a .22 rifle, and on that rifle, we ended up finding the blood of Sarah Hulbert and I believe at least one of the other victims. From Sarah Hulbert's head, we recovered a .22 bullet, and our investigator was able to determine that the bullet that killed Sarah Hulbert was fired from that .22.
In addition to the murder weapon, they find many other equally incriminating items.
And once we found the victim's cell phone and we found the victim's ATM card, we knew that those items belonged to a victim from Indianapolis, Indiana. He could have just as easily gotten rid of it, but for some reason he chose to drive around with all that evidence in the truck. So I can't explain why he did that. I'm just glad he did.
With assistance from the FBI, Postilione and detectives from other cities where victims were discovered are building their cases against Mendenhall.
The FBI was able to put a timeline together of his travels. They were able to use gas receipts, bills of lading that put him in different areas. And it was amazing at the communities that he was in during his career as a truck driver.
And when the FBI timeline traced Mendenhall to the city of Sewanee, Mendenhall never admitted to any of the murders, so police can only guess at his motives.
I think maybe it had something to do with his hatred for the prostitutes on these truck stops, his desire to humiliate them after he killed them. We got him on July the 12th, and obviously he killed someone on July the 11th, he killed someone on June the 6th, June the 25th. So it was clear that he was spiraling out of control. There was no doubt in my mind, or any other detectives' minds, that he was going to continue killing until he got caught. So I'm glad we got him when we got him. Hopefully, maybe we saved some lives.
The first murder case to go to trial is Sarah Hulbert's.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank you on behalf of the state of Tennessee.
Since Mendenhall never confessed and there were no witnesses, the Nashville prosecutor's case relies heavily on the physical evidence.
This club that was also found at the crime scene.
Obviously, the murder weapon in his truck and the victim's blood in his truck were the strongest pieces of evidence we had in the trial.
And although Sarah could never testify about what had happened to her that night, the prosecution made sure her presence was felt.
Well, we had a photograph and evidence of Sarah, and in closing arguments, sometimes we will do that. We'll show the victim to remind the jury that, you know, she was a real person, had a real life, had a real family, had a child, and it was important, and it was her time for justice.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a decision?
On the charge of first-degree murder,
Guilty of murder.
the jury finds Bruce Mendenhall guilty.
In Tennessee, a first-degree murder conviction is an automatic life sentence, which in Tennessee is interpreted as 60 years.
We didn't seek the death penalty in this case because there weren't really what's called aggravating circumstances, which are required in the state of Tennessee. We're hopeful that our conviction will be used in other jurisdictions to possibly get him the death penalty, which he richly deserves.
Mendenhall has also been indicted for a second murder in Tennessee, and he faces murder charges in Indiana and Alabama. In addition, he's still under investigation for murders in Georgia, Illinois, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas.
Justice has been served in our case and for Sarah Hulbert. In the grander scheme of things, justice for all of the other victims is still waiting, and it's been on hold for a long time, and there are a lot of families out there who don't have closure.
Among those still longing for justice are Deborah Ann Glover's daughters in Georgia.
It would just do me justice if he would just come clean with his entire soul of what he's done, because he, like anybody who takes a life, but the way he took lives, you know, he hurt a lot of families.
Why would you just start killing folks out of the blue? What was the point? Who made him God that he could just take people's lives? I don't care what they were doing.
We went to Deborah's funeral. We went to the visitation for her family. And I made it clear to the family that just because their mother lived the lifestyle she did, that she was just as important as my mother. And like I told her daughter, this is the only open homicide I have. And her case file sits on my desk every day. It's never been moved.
Until we leave the face of this earth, we are Deborah Ann's children. No murderer, you know, no profession, no being addicted to anything will take that away from the fact that we are her children and she was our mom.